Our gospel reading this morning comes from the gospel according to Luke, the 7th chapter. And we're going to start on the first verse, and it goes like this. After Jesus finished presenting all his words among the people, he entered Capernaum. A centurion had a servant who was very important to him, but the servant was ill and about to die. When the centurion heard about Jesus, he sent some Jewish elders to Jesus to ask him to come and heal his servant. When they came to Jesus, they earnestly pleaded with Jesus. "This man deserves to have you do this for him," they said. "He loves our people, and he built our synagogue for us." Jesus went with them. He had almost reached the house when the centurion sent friends to say to Jesus, "Don't worry, don't be bothered. I don't deserve to have you come under my roof. In fact, I didn't even consider myself worthy to come to you. Just say the word and my servant will be healed. I'm also a man appointed under authority with soldiers underneath me. I say to one, 'Go,' and he goes, and to another, 'Come,' and he comes. I say to my servant, 'Do this,' and the servant does it." When Jesus heard these words, he was impressed with the centurion. He turned to the crowd following him and said, "I tell you, even in Israel, I haven't found faith like this." When the centurion's friends returned to his house, they found the servant restored to health. A little later, Jesus went to a city called Nain. His disciples and a great crowd traveled with him, and as he approached the city gate, a dead man was being carried out. He was his mother's only son, and she was a widow. A large crowd from the city was with her, and when he saw her, the Lord had compassion for her and said, "Don't cry." He stepped forward and touched the stretcher on which the dead man was being carried. Those carrying him stood still. Jesus said, "Get up." The dead man sat up and began to speak, and Jesus gave him to his mother. Awestruck and filled with fear, everyone praised God. "A great prophet has appeared among us," they said. "God has come to help his people." This news about Jesus spread throughout Judea and the surrounding region. This is the word of the Lord. Thanks be to God. This morning, Luke presents to us two different stories about two different kinds of people. Luke does this throughout his gospel. Luke's gospel is a study in contrasts. It's one and then the other. It's one person and then the other, one story and then the other, one place and then the other. Luke is often showing us, by contrasting things, a deeper truth than what we see in the story. This morning we find two people who are in different stages of grief. The centurion is a man with great power. He would have been in charge of a legion of soldiers, a group of soldiers, given complete authority by the state. He had the power to say what happened and what didn't happen, whether you could build a house or not, whether you could build a synagogue or not. He had total control over this area. It's a little interesting to note that at this point in the story, there were no centurions stationed in Galilee. And so this centurion was likely a border guard. His job was to stand between Galilee and Judea and make sure that the region stayed peaceful. Jesus is wandering through the countryside when a group of people from the temple, a group of Jewish authorities, come to Jesus and say, "Listen, I know centurions are of a mixed reputation, and they have the power to do all kinds of things, but this one's a good one. This one's a good one. He is a friend to us. He takes care of us. He does things for us, and he's super sad." He's super sad because this person in his household is sick and close to dying. And in first century Galilee, when you were sick and close to dying, there was no coming back from that. There were no antibiotics, there were no steroids, there was no ICU for you to go into. And so if you were a person who was sick and close to dying, there was only one result. So Jesus is asked by these people from the temple to come and to do whatever he can to help. In contrast, we have the story of a widow. We have the story of a widow whose only son has died. Now, we assume that she was poor because widows in the Bible tend to be poor. It wasn't guaranteed. There were rich women in the Bible. There were several rich women in the Bible who play an important part in the story. But likely Luke wants us to notice that this widow is completely and utterly without power. Women in Bible times did not have their own checking account. They didn't even have their own house. They were the property of the man who they were married to. And so when this woman is identified as a widow who then loses her only son, she is completely alone and vulnerable in the world. And so we have this contrasting story between a man with power, with prestige, with authority, with a group of people behind him who are going to help him through this process, who are advocating on his behalf, and a woman with no power at all. Compare and contrast. Now, it would appear that one of these folks is more deserving of compassion than the other. It would appear to us, with all the stories that we've been told and the many times it's been banged into our heads when we've sat in this place, that Jesus and God have more compassion for the poor and for the outcast. That we are supposed to act on behalf of those without, that we are supposed to show an extra dose of kindness to those who are grieving and lost, for those who are vulnerable and powerless. But that is not what this story tells us. Compare and contrast. Both of these people are grieving. Both of these people have lost someone who are dear to them, who is close to them, who is important to their livelihood. Not just someone that they hold close to their heart, but someone who literally holds their livelihoods in their hands. Both of these people are grieving, and no matter what your external parameters in this world, no matter what kind of clothes you wear or how much money is your bank account, no matter what your power or powerlessness in our society, grief is the same for everyone. Yes, the centurion had more power, but he grieved just the same. Yes, the centurion did some things that probably made Jesus fairly angry. He was a soldier, after all. I'm sure he had committed some violence. I'm sure he had done some things and excluded people. I'm sure he had done things that would make Jesus righteously and correctly angry. But he was grieving. Now, there is a part of American Christianity that tells us that the quality of who we are and the amount of faith that we carry with us has a direct effect on how nice God is to us. Right? You've heard these people. If you take care of the poor, then God will bless you with a Lamborghini. And you might laugh, but I literally saw that. If you do the right things, if you follow the path of God, if you are the most righteous person in town, then God is going to bless you with material blessings. If you just pray hard enough, then the person that you love will get better. If you just do the right things, then you will have everything that your little heart has ever dreamed of. You can go to churches and hear this message that if something bad happens to you, it's because you did something wrong. If you get cancer, it's because you were a bad person. Or you sinned and you don't really know what you sinned, what kind of sin you did, but obviously God is punishing you with whatever bad is happening in our lives. I don't know what Eric did bad this week, but he certainly got a full share of God's punishment. Right? We hear this message and we've internalized it in our hearts, that if something awful happens to us, it's because we are not worthy of God's affection. It's because we didn't do enough or we weren't kind enough. It's because we were not valuable anymore to God, that God could only use us. We say this explicitly and implicitly. My grandmother the other day was talking to her at her table, and she said, "Well, I guess God just needed your mom more than I did." which I can't tell you how many times I've heard that at different kitchen tables. And the truth is that my mother didn't do anything, and neither did I. Death just comes. God didn't need her in heaven more than God needed her here. There was no punishment or reward. There was no reason other than we are broken people and our bodies break. There is often no reason. There is often things that are outside of our control. There is no reason why 67 people died in the Potomac River 2 weeks ago. None of those people in the airplane did anything wrong. And in fact, none of the people in the helicopter did anything wrong. Guess what? It was just an equipment failure. But we search for reasons. We try to figure out who to blame as if that will make our grief better. But it doesn't. Grief comes. It comes in little ways and big ways. And when you grieve, you're going to experience the same things as everybody else does when they grieve. You're going to get angry at stupid things. I got really angry last week at the garbage truck, because they put our trash can in the driveway, and I had to get out of my car to move it. And that extra 3 seconds of my life was just the worst thing that had ever happened in the whole world, right? You're going to get angry. You're going to be unbearably sad. You're going to bargain with God. Well, what if I had just done this? What if I had just said this, or we had gone to this doctor, or if we'd done this differently? And you're going to pretend like it never happened. I picked up the phone the other day to call my mom about a movie that I saw that she would have liked to have watched, right? And then we accept it. And you're going to go through all those things all the time. Sometimes 2 or 3 at once, because that's how grief works. It's fun, an adventure for all of us. And whether we have power in this world or not, whether we have the mantle of authority in this world or not, grief unites all of us. It makes all of us the same. And so when Jesus saw these 2 people, one with the mantle of authority and one with nothing at all, what Jesus did was react out of compassion first for both of them. There wasn't a thing either one of them did. There wasn't a thing either one of them did to earn it, to cause Jesus to show compassion upon them. There wasn't a thing either one of them did except for to be seen by Jesus, who acted out of compassion. And so when we feel out of control, when moments come where we realize we do not have as much say over the course of our life as we like to think, when things happen in the world that seem unbelievable and break our hearts, it unites all of us in that grief for a moment and gives us the opportunity to extend compassion to another, whether that person deserves it or not. Because Jesus didn't ask. Jesus didn't weigh them up to see if they were worthy or not. Jesus didn't count their sins. Jesus didn't say, you are powerful or powerless. Jesus just offered compassion to all people. And that is all we have control over, is that offering of hope and of grace and of love when it feels like there's none to be found. Amen.